Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the single national curriculum today. It is obviously a subject that is of keen interest to each and every parent, every household. It's being debated back and forth. We'll be talking about what are some of the ramifications of the enforcement of the SNC, and also how do the educationists look at it, how does the civil society look at it, and overall what is the perception and the effect that we can perceive. What is the government saying? How does it have? How will it promote fair and equal opportunity, which is what the government is talking about? How will it bring cohesion, which is what the government is talking about? How will it bring uniformity, which is what the government is saying? All of that today on Perspective. Of course, I have with me today Dr. Maryam Chughtai, who's the Director, National Curriculum Council. Thank you for joining us today. In studio, we have with us Mehnaz Akbar Aziz, who's an M&A with PMLN. Thank you for being with us today. Dr. Abdul Hameed Nayyar, who is an educationist. Thank you for joining us today. And Barrister Saeed Raza Ali, who's a legal expert. Thank you for being with us. Before we go on into the details of the SNC, we've also prepared a package on what the government aims to do with the single national curriculum and what are some of the effects that they feel it will have on education. Let's hear let's see the package.
The government of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf recognized the need to update our curriculum and started work on a single national curriculum project to update the syllabi of our schools, colleges and madaris in phases, with the initial change being in the primary level. Dissenting voices arose when the government announced the proposed changes, citing legal problems, constitutional overreach and issues in the curriculum. According to the constitution, education is a provincial subject and is not in the purview of the federal government. The federal government does have a role to play in regulating education, but it is in primary or secondary level education which the SNC seeks to encompass. Rather, it is the higher education which the federal government can regulate. Under the constitution, interprovincial matters and coordination is within the policy and legislative competence of the federal government. The government spokespersons have denounced criticisms of the single national curriculum on the basis that the federal government developed an existing curriculum that was dormant in 2006 and analyzed it in accordance with international standards. The single national curriculum itself prescribes minimum standards of education that aren't strictly binding on provinces, and that they are free to choose and evolve new standards according to their own needs. The education system is in dire need of an overhaul, and the single national curriculum can be the beginning of the betterment of the quality of education imparted in this country.
Right. I'm going to go to Dr. Maryam Chughtai. Maryam, how do you, I mean, there is criticism on the way that the textbooks are structured. There is criticism, and I don't want to go into the criticism before you have a chance to tell us some of the positives as far as the single national curriculum is concerned. But of course, I want to know, how does it promote, in your opinion, how does it promote social cohesion, alleviation of disparities, equal opportunities, which are some of the things, a holistic development of children in the light of emerging international trends, which is what, some of the points that some of the positives as far as the single national curriculum is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. The greatest positive in my mind is that we are, for the first time, trying to treat the curriculum as a living document. The last time we had curricular reforms was in 2006, and the generation that was in school at that time is very different, and the generation that is in school at this time is experiencing a very different world, a digital world. So the first big positive is that the government is very open to constant revision and feedback and updating of this curriculum, which is a standard practice in countries that have good education systems. And the second major thing that is impressive about this curriculum is an honest attempt and a successful attempt of including all 7 federating units, official representatives of all 7 federating units, which includes all 4 provinces, Gilgit-Baltistan, Azad Kashmir and ICT, in the formation of the curriculum. As we've seen later on, politics have caught up, and some, units are, specifically only Sindh is looking to exercise its due right of, taking it slow. But that inclusion is another major positive of this curriculum, which has not been seen in previous curriculum making exercises.
Okay, let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Mehnaz Akbar Aziz ji. Mehnaz, do you agree? You think that, like Mariam is saying, you think that it will promote the cohesion. You think, of course, she's saying that they're open to constant revision. But as it stands today, how do you see it?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I think at this point in time, what we are experiencing is a lot of confusion.
Okay.
I do agree with Mariam Chuftai that the intent is good. That we will create national integration, we will create cohesion, equality. But the fact of the matter is that we are overlooking a lot of factors needed for equality and integration, even for children who are out of school.
Okay.
So to see it as one of the major thrusts of dealing with all the issues in education is misleading.
Okay.
But I will just stick to the national single national curriculum. It's been 3 years since the deliberation on it, and but I feel that, and I very
let me just interject here. But it's true that the government has made a lot of effort to make sure that all the stakeholders involved have an input as far as S&C is concerned, right? I mean, they've gone to private schools, they've gone to educational bodies, all of that. Do you think that they've taken enough input as far as as far as the criticism is concerned, the way that the private schools look at it? How do you agree with that?
First of all, Mahrukh, I would like to point out here that in Pakistan, education is not a public good anymore. It's private. Most of the education providers are private. We have not been able to, at least since the last 2 or 3 decades, we haven't been able to fulfill the needs of the public regarding school structures according to our increasing population. So private sector has low-cost private sector, elite private sector, all sorts of private sector has emerged into this field.
Right.
So I feel that we have not taken into consideration. ठीक है, हमने किया. देखिए, जितना कर सकते थे उतना किया. वो उस वक्त उनको ठीक लग रहा था, उन्होंने जिस तरीके से भी किया. But I am going to talk about now.
Okay.
What's happening now?
Right.
So there are lots of stakeholders. There are students, their parents. अभी तो primary है तो इतना students का, लेकिन third, fourth grade के students, they know what they want and all that. आजकल तो इतना वो smartphones etc. They know their rights. Most of them, जो marginalized areas है उसका और issue है. Teachers, parents.
Uniformity, in terms of uniformity, because there is a lot of criticism that there is an elite class, unfortunately, in this country, and there is a public school education, which unfortunately government education, so to speak, and then there is a private education. Like you said, there isn't there isn't a uniformity in education.
देखिए वो सारा आइडियलिज्म होता है. हमने बहुत ज्यादा अगर इनिशिएटिव्स हैं, आप अगर the educational history of Pakistan is littered with policies and with these kind of initiatives, privatizations, more religion, others. We have really, मतलब ये कि एक वक्त आता है कि उठ के एक बहुत बड़ा सा इस तरह की चीज होती है. But where are we now? I'm an educationist, so where are we now?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, now what can we do now? Now is देखिए ना, parents का issue आ रहा है, textbooks का issue आ रहा है. पंजाब में तो इतना ज्यादा they have just gone out of their way. मतलब ये कि उनको इतना करने की जरूरत नहीं है, because they're harming the education sector ना. पंजाब being the largest and most populous, और हमारे बच्चे बहुत, मेरा अपनी constituency पंजाब की है, तो हमारे बच्चे बहुत seriously लेते हैं education को.
Let me come back to you. I'll just come back to you. I'm going to go to Barrister Saeed Raza Ali. Ji, Raza, you've had a chance to look at this. How do you agree? You think that because education is largely, like Mehnaz is saying, she's saying that it's not, it's largely a private subject, so to speak. Does the curriculum follow that? What does it aim to do?
Thanks so much, Mahrukh. Actually, before commenting on the curriculum, I would probably like to just state right at the very outset that I think the SNC is a good step. I think projecting it as a single national curriculum is the need of the hour, because there is an educational apartheid. It has been there, since time immemorial, and it continues to do so. So a unified curriculum is useful to the extent that it takes away various kinds of sort of disparities that exist, so that all children get the chance to study a curriculum which is pretty much uniform. The problem that I have, and I think it's a serious constitutional problem that is generally being overlooked in the debate on the actual content of the textbooks, and that is that the way that the federal government has steamrolled the SNC as far as the provinces is concerned is constitutionally very, very divisive. Now, you mentioned in your earlier report that the federal government has some legislative competence as far as education is concerned, but that legislative competence is only for higher education. So what that means is that the federal government has the power to set standards for a university, for a degree awarding institution, for sub-campuses as far as that university is concerned, but not for primary and secondary education. So by saying that the federal government is only setting minimum standards and that the provinces are ultimately, they're free to actually build on these standards, is problematic because the federal government doesn't have the constitutional mandate to do this. If this is to be a single national curriculum, it has to follow due process. It has to follow the constitutional safeguards that are recognized, and this should have emanated from the provinces. And the second point is that this is a very, very ambitious project. There has been a fair amount of haste in its specific implementation, and you can see this with the Punjab Curriculum and Textbook Board. Only specific publishing rights are okayed by them. They provide an NOC, and the fact of the matter is that there has been confusion, as the senator just mentioned. There has been absolute disarray because of the fact that this entire issue is not correct from a constitutional ground up. So we need to look at that first. We need to correct those particular wrongs. So because the Punjab government cannot be a satellite province to the federal government, it has to the ultimate initiative for commencing a curriculum based on primary and secondary education has to constitutionally begin from the provinces itself. So that is something that's very important that we need to actually talk about, and it's not being talked about enough.
Right. Okay, Raza, let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Abdul Hameed Nayyar before I go to Mariam with this. I think you've raised a very valid point, and I want her to answer this. Doctor, do you agree? You think that this is, other than the fact that what Barrister Raza is saying, he's saying that they don't have the authority, they don't have the legislative competence, in his opinion, to do this?
I think I should point out a problem with it, which is much more fundamental than what is being presented over here. Single national curriculum is illogical. It is an illogical response to a concern shown by the Prime Minister. And let me explain. The Prime Minister explained that there are three parallel systems of education. One is most successful because it opens up all the opportunities before the students. The other is less successful because it fails to prepare the students to avail all the opportunities. And the third is completely unsuccessful because it lives in a different kind of time. Now, to rectify this, what would have been the most logical thing to do? The most logical thing would have been to raise the standard of the second and the third system to the level of the first, because that is the group which is before which all the opportunities are opening up. This is what the Prime Minister wanted. But what the SNC does, the single national curriculum, what it does is actually logically completely opposite. It pulls down the best system. It pulls down the best system. The best system is now being forced to divorce itself from the system that it was following and apply the lower standard education system into their institutions. In that sense, this SLC is completely illogical. It doesn't follow it doesn't quite follow the Prime Minister's diktat. Number one.
Let me come back to you. Mariam, I think we have a few questions for you. One, that you agree with what Raza was saying, that there isn't, as far as the curriculum is concerned, this is, I guess, a little technical, whether the federal government has the legislative competence to actually steamroll this the way that they have. One, answer that, please. Mariam,
point is very important. Yes, can you hear me? I think it's a very important point. It's not very technical. It's a very simple point. After the 18th Amendment, the kindergarten to 12th grade education department has been devolved to provinces. There's just no two ways of looking at it. However, the federal government has made these minimum standards, and contrary to what my respected co-panelist Barrister Saab has said, it has not steamrolled those minimum standards. Oh, these are only minimum standards. Whatever curriculum is being put in place in all the provinces except Sindh has been passed following due process through their assemblies. Now, if you're saying that all these provincial assemblies are passing this nisab and they are making edits to model textbooks as per their need, so I think using the word steamrolling is sort of undermining the authority of these provincial assemblies. So this is not something that has been made in the federal government and has therefore just been, as the word was used, as a satellite province. That's not the case. And a specific example of that is the Quran Nazra Act, which was passed by the previous government in 2017, was subsequently passed. It was passed in 2017 by the National Assembly. But because education is devolved to the provinces, every provincial assembly also passed this act. But Sindh did not pass the Quran Nazra Act, which requires every child from kindergarten, from first to 12th grade, to read the Quran with translation. So therefore, even if the federal government says, and as it did, that these are the minimum standards, it follows the Quran Nazra Act, Sindh said in the meetings with the federal government that we did not pass this act, therefore we will not include this should we decide to go ahead with the single national curriculum in Sindh. And that was completely acceptable and completely within the law. So this is to give you a very specific, tangible example that the single national curriculum is not being steamrolled into the provinces in some satellite way. It is being passed following constitutional autonomy of the provinces. Now that said, the federal legislative list, entry 13, specifically gives the role of coordination, these are the words quote unquote, and harmony to the federal government. So the Constitution says that the federal government has no authority over the provinces, but the Constitution does not forbid the federal government to play a coordinating role. Like in the pandemic, the federal government brought people together. Yes, they're playing a very constitutional coordinated role.
Okay, let me go to Raza. Raza.
I'd like to respond to that. Yes, I think I would basically set the stage and would agree to an extent with Dr. Shukrai with respect to the fact that the SMC needs to be implemented in a way that is that satisfies the entire notion of due process and constitutionality. But she's talked about minimum standards, that they prescribe minimum standards. My question is, does the federal government have the constitutional remit to prescribe these minimum standards in the first place? Again, she's referred to item 13 of part 2 of the federal legislative list, which talks about interprovincial coordination and cooperation. But that is cooperation between the provinces in which the federal government plays some kind of a legislative role. Now, over here, you have the federal government prescribing certain model textbooks, which ultimately the Punjab Curriculum and Textbook Board is being, there's no way to sort of sugarcoat this, they've been told to sort of follow or else. So
are they bound to follow it, or are they just, do they have the leeway to whether they want to? Do they have that room?
Yes. So you have to ask yourself that if a particular province, which is the PTI majority government, what is the ultimate wiggle room do they actually have in terms of implementing these specific standards? Again, we have to take this from the actual ground up. If this is supposed to be a single national curriculum, then the interprovincial coordination should entail that all 4 provinces sit together, they devise the curriculum, they send it to the federal government who then performs a consultative role, and then you basically implement it. Again, let's be clear that the step is a good one, but the implementation is
the way that it's being done. Okay, let's move on and discuss the content now. I want to go on.
Just very small on this. There is also an issue with the indecent haste in which not enough stakeholders have been taken into account. Where is the transparency in bringing active stakeholders onto the actual table? Have their findings been publicized? Have specific private schools, their viewpoints been taken into account? You have the example of HM College, a very, very small microcosm, but they refuse to follow it. Why? Other schools might just follow. It just shows that the entire concept has been done in a fair amount of sort of disarray. That is the problem. I think that the methodology needs to improve. The idea of due process needs to be there, and all of these things need to come together.
Okay. Minaz, do you agree? I mean, you've been following the discussion so far. You think that perhaps it's been too hasty? You think that it needs to be looked into further? Because that's what it seems like the discussion is actually, with Raza saying that perhaps the step is a good one, but it needs to be further thought about. The way that it's been done, perhaps it needs to be rethought.
Mahrukh, and give me time to respond to this. You need people who are experienced in education, people who are educationists.
Right.
You need implementers, you need people who are on the ground, you need all stakeholders, like the parents, the teachers, others, private sector, public sector, and we have so many, the private and the public sector is so diverse according to the realities. So to think that we will throw a spanner which is the single national curriculum, I'm saying the intent is not bad, but to throw the spanner and everybody will respond, we are the worst country in implementing. We haven't been able to implement our legislation, and something like this unfolding, it's a disaster in the making. So, ideally, if you look at it, the overarching, okay, it's fine, the intent is okay, but equality and all that, I think there is a lot of confusion. Even if you ask the implementers within the districts, within the departments of education, you will know the real story, which unfortunately I haven't talked to, but you will know the real story of what the pushback is. In my constituency, people are not happy, parents are not happy, because they take education very seriously. So, you can't bulldoze reform. So there is, and if there is a pushback, which there is, you have to, be still and listen carefully and act upon that. I feel very strongly that if this government wanted to do a single national curriculum, they should have gone ahead and do some pilot projects. Take a few districts in Punjab, take Islamabad Capital Territory, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, if there is readiness in there, not bulldoze it like that. This will not, and already, like Raza Saab has said, already you're seeing fissures, people are serious institutions at the top. But all educational institutions are serious, but at the top are now pushing back, like HSN is, and the SIM already has said no.
They want to take it according
the Madaris and Army public school systems are also questioning this thing. So I think it's a time that the government should not fall for the ego game, but sit down and revise revisit and not push the country. We are not in a position, we already have an educational emergency with 2.4 million children out of school and with additional 1 million children out of school because of the pandemic. So I'll give you an example of PMLN. PMLN is driven by education, and we've had a lot of successful reforms. So we haven't, for the single national curriculum, we haven't had a multi-party sit down and discuss it. You know, this is about Pakistan. It's not about PTI or, you know, any kind of ranking, because there's not going to be a global ranking. And if there is a disaster, everybody will suffer. And, you know, we have reasonable people. Dr. Chufta is there and all of that. We have reasonable people. But to say that, you know, we had consultations with the provinces and a few people are sitting there, and you know that bureaucracy is all about transfers, they're not educationists. So we need to now, in the second phase, just stall the efforts and look into the matter very carefully.
Okay, let me come back to you. Ji, Dr. Abdul Hameed Nair, Ji, do you agree? You think that perhaps, you know, this is we can, you know, work on this, because primarily everybody seems to agree here that it's a good step. But perhaps it's being done too quickly. Perhaps you know, it's all the nitty-gritties have not been thought about. There are pros and cons that have not been looked into. Those are some of the issues that perhaps can be looked into, right? Dr. Nair, would you agree?
I think these are merely peripheral problems. Some of the central problems are still not have still not been discussed over here. And I think people have completely overlooked my point that the major concern that the Prime Minister showed has resulted in this curriculum, which is completely illogical response to the Prime Minister's desire. I think the single national curriculum should have been the GCSE curriculum, which makes the people of private schools excel in the world. They go out and all the opportunities open up before them. Rather than that, you have pulled down the people who have been following GCSE, but that is a point that I have already made, so I'm not going to go there. Right. There are other important things. For example, the transgression on the provincial domain is not the only violation of the Constitution. There is another violation of the Constitution, which is the Article 22(1) of the Constitution, which says that no person will be taught in any education institution will be taught any religion other than his own. And here, you know, the books that have come out and the curriculum itself introduces so much of Islamiyat in compulsory subjects like English and Urdu and other subjects that the non-Muslim students are forced to read Islamia through those subjects, and that is completely violation of the fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. And that is a very serious problem, because all the non-Muslim people in the country are very unhappy about it, because the amount, I mean, this violation has been going on earlier too, but the quantum of violation this time is much larger. And I think this is something about which we have been continuously engaged with the curriculum wing from day one. We have been telling them that, look, don't violate Constitution, abide by the Constitution, and they have completely refused to accept that this is a violation. Although the Supreme Court also has said that this is a violation, but although this is the final verdict of the Supreme Court has
Let me go to Raza with this. Ji, Raza, what can you tell us about what Dr. Nair is saying as far as you know, the introduction of Islamiyat and being forced to study another religion?
Actually, I think that Dr. Saab has a valid point over here. It is constitutionally prohibited for you to study any particular religion that you do not specifically ascribe to. But I think the larger point that all stems from this entire discussion is that the PTI government has actually demonstrated itself to be a government of haste. You can see that in the ordinances that they actually promulgate, right? So the legislation is a hard grind. it is a constitutional, it's an intellectual, it is also a sociological endeavor. You just cannot have a particular viewpoint and essentially adopt an entire policy, especially for a project that has a magnitude as large as this. That, as Senator Saga also pointed out, something that is going to affect all our children. And you see, the good point of the SNC, and I'm sure Dr. Chatai is incredibly capable over here. Her credentials are absolutely impeccable. It shouldn't just stop at a curriculum. The idea of a curriculum should actually then encompass critical thinking. It should actually be a step away from rote learning procedures. The actual digitized idea of education should also be given some priority, or in fact a lot of priority due to the COVID situation. And ultimately the aim is to provide a product where all children can compete in a level playing field. As a philosopher Socrates said that the worst life that you live is a non-examined one. So if you are to have the SNC, which is ultimately a project of such large proportions, you need to do it right. And a 2 to 3 year project that ultimately, I'm forced to use this word sort of steamroll, but I'm going to use it again, is problematic. I agree with what Senator Sahiba says that perhaps it would have been best served to have a pilot project where you had some institutions that are private institutions primarily that are well off and those which do not have means, where you introduce the project, you mulled over it, and you then look at what the actual problems with the project were. Because there are going to be problems. You will ultimately need to form some kind of a consensus, because this is not a policy or a project that's, for example, a tax. It's not on a small, minute policy matter. It is something that affects all of us. So some idea of thoughtful consideration should have been taken into account. This is into passing an ordinance. You have to...
Let me go to Dr. Mariam. Dr. Mariam.
I'd like to address all of these questions. I'll tell you what haste looks like when you say that this has been done in a lot of haste. Haste would have been if the curriculum was introduced and then just that same year the government introduced an exam and expected that every child was suddenly going to wake up bilingual the next day. Haste would have been if the government gave no plans of any kind of teacher training, assessment framework development, was not open to feedback. That would have been haste. But we have to make a start from somewhere. And the government has been very explicit that this is a start and that every school, madrasa, private, public, should try to hit these minimum standards. If they're already above them, then they don't need to change anything. And as far as the bilingual transition is concerned, to try and gradually make that transition. And the examination system, that reform is coming up in another year or two at least. It's going to take that much time. So for us to say that all of this was done in haste, I think it's not really understanding how education works. It's not like a vaccine that you get a shot and then you're done. The academic year it is a full year. And the rollout is not even over a full year. And if you are expecting that we should take 12 years to bring reform, then what is the fault of that second grader who just missed it by 1 year, was just born 1 year earlier? So I think that argument is problematic. And secondly, the question of that this curriculum affects every single child and stakeholders should have been taken on board, I absolutely agree with that. But let me also point out that every single child was being affected in 2017 as well. Just to use an example, the Quran Nazra Act was passed unanimously in the parliament by every single political party. Not one article in Dawn, not one webinar, not one question, not one tweet about it that of significance. But now, because this curriculum impacts the children of the rich, suddenly this hue and cry about where are all the stakeholders. Now, that point is well taken, that if we took on 400 stakeholders, which is unprecedented not just in Pakistan, in other countries also, experts make the curriculum. Curriculum making exercises are not democratic exercises, but now we see that it's not 400 people, it's perhaps 4,000 people who want their voices heard. And as the new director of the National Curriculum Council, I'm willing to use technology to bring in 40,000 voices because people want to be heard. But to say that stakeholders will not, everyone who wanted to be a part of it, there was a call in the newspaper to participate. Not one university except Alpha University applied for it. So for us to say that, this impacts every single child, but we were not asked, that's not true. You were asked. You just thought that this was going to affect only the poor kids. You didn't think it would affect the HSNs and everyone. As far as the HSN question is concerned, I think it's too quick to assume that HSN is rejecting it. I've read the principal statement and it says explicitly that we are following SNC and CERT, and the rest is all implementation related aspects of it. We are giving school time, we're giving Madaris 5 to 6 years to accommodate the changes that need to be made. The final point I want to make about Article 22, where, and Barrister Saab will confirm this, that the exact words in the Constitution are that we cannot give religious instruction, worship or celebration related to a particular religion to a child of a religion that is not his or her own. There's a difference between instruction of Islam, like how to pray, how to fast, and teachings of Islam. Similarly, when you teach about the Crusades, you don't make children Christians. When you teach about Ashoka or Buddha, you don't make them Buddhist. So you can teach people about values, about character building in a pluralistic manner and still not be violating the Constitution. Now there is room for improvement, certainly. Islamic instruction, wherever it's religious instruction, it belongs in the teachings of the religion, separate from religious instruction, belongs in the subject of Islamiyat. But we also have 5 dedicated curricula for Christians, Sikhs, Kalash, Hindus, and Baha'is. The only country in the world which has a curriculum at the national level for a minority, religious minority Baha'i. So I think for us to just rush into saying that this is a violation of Article 22 is not really looking at the entire picture.
Okay, fair enough. Mehnaz, you wanted to say
something? I wanted to comment on Mariam's observations, and I feel that, she is time and again referring to the Parliament. Now the Parliament works according to the majority, Mariam. And a lot of these legislations and ordinances are bulldozed. We necessarily do not agree with them. We do realize, having had the experience of so many years and being, election processes, dealing with constituencies, so we realize what the ramifications are. We won't wait 3 years onwards to see that this implementation is itni kharab ho rahi hai. We are not waking up today to realize that. But the fact is this, that to say that every party, every political party was on the same wavelength and agreeing is not the right statement. Okay. Because not everybody was agreeing to neither the any of the the legislations or the acts or the ordinances.
But did you have an input? Did you get a chance to comment on it?
No, not at all. I mean, the legislation are brought in and they are passed with a simple majority. क्या input हो सकती है? What we do is we do a walkout.
Right.
So walkout से कोई चीज लेकिन पता है उसको छोड़ दें मरियम. But what we need to, because हम सारे we are concerned about the children of Pakistan, how this is going. We are nervous, we are anxious, how this is going to roll out.
You think regardless of the process
and the parties and everything, but obviously the legislation and our constitution, we have to be very careful about it, and we need people like Barrister Raza to be, I was reading his article in one of the newspapers and very impressive. So the thing is this, that So let's come back to, okay, so everybody missed the bus. Let's say everybody missed the bus to comment on the curriculum or to be a part of the process. But woke up suddenly one morning to realize that, we made a big blunder and we want to be a part of it. Our children are being affected. Let's be open to that.
Okay, right.
Let's be open to that and let's partner in that and let's collaborate.
Right. Unfortunately, on that note, we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Mariam Chugtai, thank you for your time. Mehnaz Akbar Aziz, thank you for joining us today. Barrister Saeed Raza Ali, thank you for being with us today. Dr. Abdul Hameed Nair, thank you for joining us. I think overall the discussion today was very fruitful, and I think that it doesn't matter. I think all the stakeholders agree that it doesn't matter whether, like Mehnaz is saying, that everybody missed the bus. They were not, whatever the reasons were, they were not interested. They didn't get there. They didn't get to give their input in time. They weren't asked in time. The government didn't ask them whether they didn't want to participate. The whys and the point is that this is a very, very important subject. The point is it does relate to each and every child of this country. It is something that, like Dr. Mariam is saying, that she's willing to take benefit of technology and have even 40,000 people participate and give their opinion on it. I think that there shouldn't be a time limit. There shouldn't be a time, rollout as far as such an important topic is concerned. And if there are issues, I think the government is willing to look at them. The government is willing to analyze them and perhaps change things accordingly. Let's hope that across the board, all stakeholders can have their input, and we can, because everybody seems to agree, regardless of political affiliations, that this is a step in the right direction. How to change it, how to perhaps, deal with the issues that we're experiencing is something that can be worked upon. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.